Welcome to Abortion Academy, a rescheduled Abortion Academy. So if you made it, thanks for following our beautiful guests um, to a couple weeks later. My name is Amelia Bono, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm the executive director of Shout Your Abortion, which is the nationwide organization working to normalize abortion and elevate paths to access regardless of legality. We make resources, campaigns, and media intended to arm existing activists, create new ones, and foster collective participation in abortion access all over the country. Abortion Academy is a monthly webinar series where one of our brilliant colleagues takes a deeper dive into their area of expertise. And these sessions are for anyone who's looking to deepen their knowledge, connect dots between issues happening at the regional, national, and international levels, or to just get some fresh ideas to take back into their communities. We also have a relatively new study abroad series that is happening sort of interspersed with our abortion academies, where we pair a US activist with someone who's working on abortion access internationally, because we do very much see ourselves as part of a global movement for abortion access. Global solidarity is incredibly important to us. We are fueled by these relationships, and we are really excited about sharing the insight that we gather from our brilliant international friends with folks here in the US. Audience members are going to be off camera and muted for security reasons throughout the session, but you'll be able to ask questions in the chat throughout the session. And Sahar is going to be talking to us for about half an hour, and then I will pop back up for a Q&A. And we also have live Spanish translation available. So if you'd like to listen in Spanish, you can go down to the bar at the bottom of your Zoom screen, click the globe, and select the language that you would like to listen in. So I am so excited to be speaking today with Sahar Pirzada from Heart to Grow. Heart works to promote sexual health, uproot gendered violence, and advance reproductive justice by establishing choice and access for the most impacted Muslims. We know that Muslim bodies are already politicized and surveilled by the state. And so it's not surprising that Muslim abortion seekers navigate very specific and unique barriers to finding safe, compassionate, non-judgmental, culturally competent care. And that's why it's so beautiful and critical that Heart does this work so specifically, not just securing care, but decolonizing and destigmatizing abortion care for Muslims. Sahar Pirzada is a Pakistani American Muslim woman who grew up in the Bay Area of California and currently lives on Tongva land in Los Angeles with her family. Sahar is the director of movement building for Heart, where she explores the intersections of gendered Islamophobia, reproductive justice, and abolition. And Sahar's work with Heart has been featured in Truthout, Teen Vogue, Now This, NPR, and at the place where I first met Sahar, which was the People's Choice Awards in 2022, which we will talk about in the Q&A. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sahar, and also Lena, who's going to be running the slides for us, also with Heart. So take it away, Sahar.
Thank you, Amelia, and hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Such an honor. I'm such a fan of Shout Your Abortion and literally every single person that works at the organization. I have nothing but praise and good vibes and amazing things to say. So such an honor to be here. Again, my name is Sahar Pirzada. I use she, her pronouns. I am the director of movement building at Heart, and I'm joined by Lena Abid, who is our newly hired community organizer with Heart, and she's going to be supporting me with a slide share. Um, Today, we're basically going to be focusing on Heart's work when it comes to abortion and abortion access and kind of the work we've done specifically around promoting a culture shift within Muslim communities to understand abortion. And so let's get right into it. a little bit about the organization that I work at and for. I've been with the org for over a decade, and we've been in existence for almost 16 years now. But as was mentioned, we work to promote sexual health, uproot gendered violence, and advance reproductive justice. We envision a world where all Muslims are safe and exercise self-determination over their reproductive lives in the communities they live, work, and pray in. We're obsessed with acronyms at Heart, and so Heart itself is actually an acronym, and it stands for Health Education, Advocacy, Research, and Training. And so we kind of work towards this mission and this vision by using those various different tools. And so my work around movement building kind of fits across the board, but more so within the advocacy and kind of systems change advocacy work. And you see in the middle there, that's my daughter, Safia, and myself. For us, it's really also building the world we want to see for our families, current and future. A little bit about me, beyond kind of what was shared. I live in Los Angeles. I grew up in the Bay Area. I went to UC Berkeley for my undergrad. Go Bears, if anybody else is a Cal Bear on here. I also moved to Singapore for about 3 years right after graduating and worked at a gender advocacy organization out there. And it was like the most amazing experience ever because I was taken out of kind of this like US centric bubble and realized that there's ways of being, there's ways of learning, there's ways of doing activism outside of maybe what we have here in the US on Turtle Island. Moved back in 2015 to the US and settled down in Los Angeles. My husband is a filmmaker, and so kind of needed to be in proximity to the industry. But I was really fortunate enough to get a job working with the youth in the Muslim community in the greater Los Angeles area. And at the same time, I was volunteering for Heart. We had no money then, it was volunteer based. And we we got like our first grant. And I remember like I got paid maybe like $100 to like do a workshop, and it was like such a big deal. And now we are an amazing team of like 8 people that are across the US. I'm based in Los Angeles, but we have team members in DC, New York, kind of Chicago, Tennessee, the Bay. So it's really beautiful to see how much this work has grown. And that's also because with regards to the needs have grown, and the needs have maybe always been there, but they've just become more visible in the past few years, especially. Being from Southern California and having roots here now, this is home. And so just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge like it's been a really, really hard week for my community. There was a horrific school shooting that happened in San Diego at the masjid there, and just hopped off a call, Lena and I, with a bunch of other community members, and got like an eyewitness from somebody that is an activist in San Diego, and kind of just like a reminder of like we keep each other safe. We've always been the ones to keep each other safe, and like the state and the cops and elected officials are partially responsible for the kinds of violences that we experience on our bodies, given how Muslim bodies in particular are politicized in this country. So just honoring the lives that were lost, the 3 Muslim men that put their lives on the line to defend our community, and kind of just a reminder of how precious community really is in these moments where we can only kind of build solidarity with each other and protect each other. Yeah, so um, just taking a moment to kind of sit with that. But again, like this is what guides me to do the work that I do, and why I do it is really grounded in community, and we're kind of guided by the lived experiences of folks in our community with how we do our work. So I am really humbled to share a small part of what that work looks like with regards to bodily autonomy and abortion access and reproductive justice. Back in 2024, we launched a campaign which is called RAHIM. And it stands, so Raham, the word is an Arabic word, and it actually means womb. And the kind of letters within that word are the same letters that are the root of the word rahma, which means compassion. And for us, it was really about embodying compassion in all matters of the womb and beyond. Knowing that reproductive justice and our reproductive and sexual lives go and extend way beyond just that. But we centered on RAHIM as our acronym, which stands for Reproductive Agency Honoring Impacted Muslims. So again, really just coming back to like we do this work for and with and by Muslims in our community. Our team is like 8 people. We're all directly impacted Muslims. So a lot of it is responsive to what our personal needs have been over the years and what we felt like we have needed and we haven't received, whether it's structurally, like at a community level or interpersonally. So let's jump into it. Um, with this campaign that we launched back in 2024, we were really trying to position Heart as like this sibling that you can trust within the community, right? Like if you're seeking any sort of advice, services, information, we wanted to kind of be the folks that people could go to when they needed that, right? And judgment-free kind of zone. For us, we see this as like a deeply religious responsibility to be present and to take care of each other. And so, again, kind of like it's also rooted in this idea of abolition, right? Like we know that the state doesn't give a shit about us. And we know that there are very few institutions that also center us. And so we have to center ourselves and be present and be available for each other. And so, how does Heart fit into that ecosystem is really thinking about the needs that folks have when it comes to their sexual and reproductive lives and how we want to be positioned as the folks people can call within the community when and if they need anything at all. And so the campaign itself offered a few different things and addressed a few different barriers as well. So we looked deeply into the faith itself. Islam as a religion is so diverse and it's not a monolith. There's many different ways of being Muslim. There's many different ways of understanding the faith. And so we looked at kind of the variety of opinions that exist about various different sexual and reproductive healthcare topics and try to kind of offer that information for folks, for those that it's important for them to know before making a decision. General medical information, resources that we built. We also trained and offer chaplaincy services. So for folks that are maybe going through various instances and they kind of, their like spiritual health is being impacted or their emotional health is being impacted. We have trauma-informed chaplains that we also have like offered to be made available in the community. We have a referral network as well of doulas, birth workers, like medical professionals that specialize in various different things, therapists, lawyers, because unfortunately that's a reality too. I'm forgetting some of the other folks that are in our referral network, but generally speaking, like it's supposed to be pretty comprehensive. And so any, as you're kind of going through your lived experience of having a sexual and reproductive life, if you needed to get in touch with somebody to support you along that journey, we're trying to build that out within this referral network. And then I think also just like partnering with abortion funds, other reproductive justice organizations, clinics that we trust with regards to their politics and with regards to kind of making and ensuring that, any kind of experience of anti-Muslim racism that folks might have to deal with is at like a minimal, right, with the folks that we're referring them to. And let me go to the next one. Okay, so, for us as we were doing our work, there were many different kind of stages to how we built Raham. We talked to doctors and doulas and kind of got an idea of like what are the things that people face with regards to their sexual and reproductive well-being. And it was like every other community, it's like literally everything, right? So but that some of the things that were coming up were people wanted to know, like, what does Islam say? Or what are the Islamic opinions about XYZ, whether it's like IVF or abortion or using milk from a, breast milk bank, right? What are the like Islamic legalities with regards to accessing these different things? And so we have like we have a beautiful group of like Muslim feminist scholars that we did deep dive interviews with on a range of topics. And just as we expected, when we spoke to each of these scholars, they all give us different like opinions about things. They're like, oh, well, I would say this is permissible for this reason, and that's actually maybe not the most ethical approach. And, forget about the laws, just go to the spirit. It was amazing, right? And it reaffirmed for us that there's no one way of being Muslim. You can approach things from different standpoints. And for us, it was more about, okay, we're going to offer this information and ultimately support people with whatever decision they want to make. What do they need access to in order to act on that decision? But in general, when it came to abortion, I feel like there was a consensus that like this is something that is supported within the Muslim community. And so there was a survey that was done by another organization called ISPU, the Institute of Islamic. Actually, I don't know what it stands for. We'll see it in the next slide. But they did a survey and they asked questions about different political issues. So one of sorry, Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, ISPU, and this was specifically for the American Muslim population, and this was conducted in 2022. There we go. Going back to the last chart, there was a question that was asked about um, should abortion be allowed in Islam under any circumstance? Or should abortion be not allowed in Islam under any circumstance, right? And so overwhelming majority of folks disagreed with this. They were like, no, like basically it should be allowed. And then if you go to the next slide, views on abortion amongst Muslims. So almost 60% of those that were surveyed believed that abortion should be legal in all or most cases, right? So, this idea that like abortion is not accepted, well, I think there's like maybe two layers to this, right? There's like within faith communities and then more specifically within Muslims. So within the Muslim community, it's actually majority of folks believe that it should be legal. And then if you keep going, we put together a lot of resources in our project that talk specifically about abortion and the Islamic rulings that exist around it and like why those Islamic rulings are the way they are. And again, at the end of the day, we support everyone with whatever decision they want to make, but recognizing that for some Muslims, like it is important to know and take this into consideration when they are making decisions. And so one of the things is this idea of like there's a point during the pregnancy at which the soul enters the fetus. And there's different schools of thought within our Islamic tradition, and the different schools of thought have different opinions about when that point is. And so majority of them believe it happens at around 120 days. So that takes you to like, second trimester kind of vibes. But at the same time, if there could be other factors that would weigh heavier on whether or not an abortion is like Islamically permissible or deemed acceptable. So like if there's a threat of harm or endangerment to the pregnant person, if there's a presence of fetal anomalies that get discovered during the pregnancy. And then, I mean, in general, it's like centering the person that's carrying the pregnancy. And like they could have a variety of different reasons for why they might want to terminate or have an abortion. And So this was one of the resources that we put together, um, that we as an organization still recognize that the law is oftentimes created, like these rulings and the laws within these different schools of thought are oftentimes created by like cis hetero men who may never have carried a pregnancy and maybe don't have lived experience themselves. So there's only so much that they can take into consideration, and there's limitations to it, right? So for us, it's always about centering the directly impacted, centering the folks that are making these decisions themselves, and honoring that their lived experience and their lived realities way more than whatever laws are. I have the shirt that Shout Your Abortion made that says laws aren't real. And like, that's my favorite shirt to wear everywhere, every day. I wore it just this past weekend. And I take that into consideration even with regards to like Islamic law, because I feel like there's the divine word of God, and then there's the interpretation of that that guides our legal rulings. And I take the divine nature of God's word very seriously, but the laws that are man-made, I sometimes feel like there might be missing pieces. Um, so we have this like amazing book that I would highly recommend folks get, if, especially if you're like Muslim and exploring sex and healthy relationships. It's called The Sex Talk. And in there, this is just an excerpt that I pulled from the book itself. But it talks about kind of like the history of abortion and how it was practiced in Muslim societies. And historically, it's always been a decision that's like between the pregnant person themselves and then their provider. Like they consult their provider, maybe it's their birth worker, doula, or doctor. But in terms of the interference of the state or interference of like male authority or like, religious authority, like that's been actually very minimal historically. So I think there's something to be said about kind of going back to our tradition and thinking about like, okay, where did this turn take where all of a sudden people feel like they have a right to the decisions that are being made? Like, sure, give your input, but in terms of having control over it, whether it's from the state or religious scholarship or any other entity, there isn't really a basis for that Islamically. And then if we go next, so, where did this idea even come from, right? That like Islam is this super restrictive faith that is perhaps anti-abortion or anti-feminist. I mean, I think a part of it is white Christian nationalism and supremacy that has seeped into parts of the Muslim community, but also whose voices get uplifted when it comes to these topics. So, these are just like some excerpts that we got of like around the time Roe v. Wade was being overturned, even folks within like liberal Dem spaces were being Islamophobic, right? They were talking about, oh, what are you trying to implement Islamic Sharia, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, actually, if you were to implement Islamic Sharia, it'd be a lot more nuanced and it would be a lot more permissive and it would actually center the person that is pregnant. But that take is like very much drowned, right, in the noise. And because there's been a long history of seeing Islam as a faith and Muslims as a community as being, again, like controlling and violent and anti-feminist, and that like seeping into the larger like public in this country. And like even unfortunately, like the going back to like the shooting that happened in San Diego earlier this week, it's like they were white supremacists. They were white Christian nationalist supremacist boys who were 17 and I think 19 who were like, you know, they had been fed the narratives about who Muslims are and how they're a threat to this country, how they're a threat to Christian ideals, whatever it might be, and targeted the Muslim community because of the narratives they've been fed by the government, by elected officials, by the media, by the fact that there's like literally multiple genocides happening of Muslim populations globally, whether it's in Gaza or Sudan or what's happening in Iran. It's like Muslim bodies are disposable. Um, And so just wanted to like very much uplift that this doesn't like when it comes to the narratives about abortion and Muslims, those narratives seep into that experience as well. I remember when I had my abortion, I was worried about how it would be perceived by my larger community, and it was like I feel like it was almost like a sigh of relief um, and an embodiment of what I actually believe my faith to be because there was nothing but an outpouring of love and support, and it was just like here for you. We're here for you. We're here for you with whatever you want to do, whatever decision you want to make, whatever you need from us. We will show up and center you. And I'm like, wow, that's what my faith teaches, and that's what I want embodied by everybody that has that, is making a decision about whether or not to have an abortion, that like the community centers the person and screws the laws, screws the like policing that might happen and just offers an immense amount of care and access. And so I mean a lot of what Raham is and with regards to how we framed what we can offer the larger community for abortion access is based on my own experience, and that experience was based on how like the Muslims in my life that were my family and my friends in my community like showed up for me, and that was like guided by their own faith understanding. So shout out to us. Moving along. So yeah, so again, like these rulings on abortion are varied in Islam, and it's very like much depending on your situation or whatever. So then like why, like where does this idea that it's more restrictive come from? And we blame it on the state, but we also blame it on something we call gendered Islamophobia. So this term has been around for a lot longer than since 2019, but we use the definition that the Raksha came up with, which is that gendered Islamophobia consists of the ways the state utilizes gendered forms of violence to oppress, monitor, punish, maim, and control Muslim bodies, right? So a lot of the anti-Muslim racism and the anti-Muslim hate that we experience, it's guided policies that have controlled our bodies and seen our bodies as disposable, and that kind of trickles down and is experienced in gendered ways as well. And so we have like a few different layers to how gendered Islamophobia shows up. Sometimes when people try to like police each other, even in the community, I'm kind of like, that's your internalized gendered Islamophobia showing up, or the communal gendered Islamophobia showing up, right? Like, that you think that this is part of our tradition and our practice. Like, where did you learn this from? But we see this as like a structural issue, right? Like, the fact that like parents and people that are in Gaza like don't have access to sexual and reproductive health care at a very basic level, and it's withheld from them, and it's seen as acceptable that it's withheld from them is part of this, right? Folks within there was a Planned Parenthood in Wisconsin where the chief of staff was an Islamophobic, anti-Muslim, anti-Palestinian, anti-Arab racist who posted multiple social media posts that made that stance very clear. And she was the chief of staff of a Planned Parenthood, right? So imagine somebody from our community is trying to access services there to take care of their body, to support them in their access of sexual and reproductive well-being. Would they feel comfortable knowing that that person is employed there, and not only employed but given a position of leadership there, right? So those are the layers that we're dealing with when it comes to how gendered Islamophobia shows up at a structural level, institutional level, and then also like still trying to figure out how to support folks in that community to access the care that they need. These are just some comments that might demonstrate what we mean when it comes to gendered Islamophobic tropes, right? So, and this is reminiscent of what we also see, like with regards to pink washing and with regards to like queer liberation. We see this with regards to like ecofeminism as well, right? Like there's a lot of like There's a lot to unpack, but both within the community, beyond within our movement spaces, and then beyond institutionally and structurally with the state. Moving on, I think I'm pretty much wrapped. This is just an overview of some of the resources we've been able to create. For us, we're, inching along with regards to this culture shift within our community. We're inching along with regards to the narrative shift we want to see in the larger movement spaces, as well as the communities that we serve, around how yeah, you can have an abortion and there's nothing wrong with it. And actually, we shouldn't have stigma when it comes to abortion, because from historically how abortions took place in Islamic societies, there wasn't a stigma. And so, where did the stigma come from, especially in a US context? We're trying to better understand as perhaps a symptom of colonization and white Christian nationalism or supremacy, that's like rubbed off on our Muslim communities. And that I'll pause there, and then happy to take questions or jump into a conversation. But I'm just really grateful to be able to share more about our work and how we support Muslims trying to access abortion in our communities. And for me, as somebody, as a Muslim who's had an abortion, it's also just so um, it means a lot to be able to share about this and to share about our experiences, because they continue to be there, but they're not as visible. So thank you all, and thank you, Lena, for sharing slides.
Thank you, Sahar. Oh, okay, everybody. You can drop your questions in the Q&A box, and Sahar and I are going to chat. Lena, did you want to be in on the chat too? Or yeah?
Sure.
Okay. Um, thank you so much for talking to us about just this like loving radical work. It just makes my heart feel good to listen, and um, I'm just grateful for you spending time with us, and also want to acknowledge just the incredible pain that exists in the community, especially this week, but constantly, um, and 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 especially over the last few years, as we've seen this genocide in Gaza continue. Um, so I there was so much um, in your presentation where I was finding parallels to all sorts of sort of like frameworks that SYA feels like there's a lot of stuff where it was like, oh, this is really similar. Um, there's a parallel, and also this is really specific, and like acknowledging the specificity is crucial, and is like not done in a lot of movement spaces, which are often even if they are RJ spaces, they might be like sort of, and even if they are sort of like posed as a, or like framed as a like reaction to like Christian nationalism and stuff, it's still like being shaped in reaction to Christianity, if that makes sense, as opposed to being something that is like centered around understanding specific experiences and concerns of Muslim community. Um, and I wanted to talk about stigma off the bat, because I think that that was a place where I like heard a lot of similarity. And Sahar, I love that you use this like data from the jump off that's like, this is how Muslim community really feels about abortion. And like a huge similarity that I think I saw is like, this isn't as people aren't as against this as people think they are. And that misconception is part of what keeps people isolated in their experience. which I think was really reflective in what you said, Sahar, about your own experience. So does that resonate? Like,
Yeah, totally. Because I feel like there's, I mean, we talk about this a lot in Heart in general of like whose voices are centered and whose voices are the loudest, right? But they
mhm,
might not be the most representative, right? It's just
right.
ones that are known. We call them like the celebrities that
Uh-huh.
maybe are not, it's not always for good reasons, but they have the mic. And oftentimes it's because of patriarchy and privilege and how that functions within our own community and beyond, right? So like if you, I did a fun activity where I just Googled abortion in Islam on YouTube and saw what
Hmm.
popped up. And like most of the discussions were Muslim men. Who I'm like, have you had an abortion? I don't know. So,
Right.
you know, like,
Right.
and then even within that, it's right, like, which, um, like racially, which groups are also like offered a mic to talk about their
Hmm.
experiences and the barriers they face, where are they located geographically, what specific sect of Islam are they from? Like all of that stuff is flattened. And so
Right.
so that's something I think about. And then and like even for like and that's with like a lot of issues, whether it's abortion or like queer liberation or
Hmm.
you think about like racism, anti-black racism within our communities, it's like it's either like, oh, that's not an issue for us, and therefore we're just
Hmm.
not going to talk about it, or it's like, oh, that doesn't relate, that's not relevant to our community, blah blah blah. We work a lot on gender-based violence as well, where it's like
Yeah.
people are like, oh, that doesn't happen in Muslim communities. I'm like, it absolutely happens in our communities. We have
Yeah.
the statistics are not different for us, whereas like the statistics around abortion in Muslim communities is 100% not different from
Yeah.
the normal population, right? It's 1 in 4. It's 1 in 4.
Right. Right.
And so what does that mean? That means you know someone who's had an abortion. You love someone that's had an abortion. And
Uh-huh.
so whether or not it's visible to you, it's a reality, and we have to destigmatize it so that people can get the support that they need. That part of the conversation is what we're trying to do with Raham, is like make it
Hmm.
visible through storytelling, make it
Right.
visible through kind of just naming it, right? Like
Yeah.
the number of effing social media influencers from the Muslim community that talk about sexual health and will never say the
Hmm.
word abortion. They will say,
Yeah.
miscarriage and termination,
Yeah.
or whatever, but they won't say abortion. And it's like,
Yeah.
why like recreate that
Hmm.
stigma when that's not our stigma
Totally.
to hold as Muslims? Like, we don't need to have that stigma. It's not part of our tradition. If we look at Muslim societies dating back to the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, birthing people were having abortions and it wasn't stigmatized. So where did that
Right.
stigmatization come in? I blame colonization.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask about sort of the roots of stigma specifically, because I think that this is another thing where it's like stigma exists everywhere across, demographic, faith, like the world, history, and it also kind of like operates differently in every like micro community.
Yeah.
And you've talked a lot about like gender-based violence and gender-based Islamophobia. And I guess I wonder, as a person who like is fairly ignorant in like my understanding of the faith and of literally all faiths, um, how much do you think sort of abortion stigma as it exists in Muslim community, is it in the same kind of way that it is in like Catholicism or Christianity, kind of rooted to like women shouldn't be having sex
It's not
outside?
about the
Like it's,
sex, I would say. I mean, yes and no, right? There is a stereotype that it's like, I don't know,
or like if
15-year-old
women
girl.
have, I guess, is the stereotype like if women are having sex, it should be procreative? Is
No,
it
no,
like,
no, no. So
no?
that isn't as much of a thing. I think that there's a healthy relationship to sex and sexual pleasure within
Mm-hmm.
Muslim communities. So you don't just have sex to procreate. Like that's
Okay.
and that
That's some Catholic shit.
yeah, like you can, but we
Yeah,
also
right.
support birth
Okay.
control being used, and like access to
Yes.
birth control is part of the teachings. But I think
Amazing.
where it comes in is around this idea of the sanctity of life. And so,
Mm-hmm.
like, the point of ensoulment, therefore, is so
Mm-hmm.
important for people. Like, and I'll say, like, even when I had my abortion, I found out at like 12 weeks. We scheduled it for
Mm-hmm.
14 weeks. Should it
Mm-hmm.
have been some kind of scheduling conflict where it went beyond the 120 days? I feel like I might have held a little bit more hesitation and or like spiritual guilt or something, right? Because for
Mm-hmm.
me, I'm like, okay, most of the schools Islamically agree that like abortion is permissible up to that 120-day mark. So if I
Mm-hmm.
clear that 120-day mark, then the point of ensoulment hasn't reached, right? So
Uh-huh.
so I would say there's definitely a divide when it comes to that, right? When is that point
Uh-huh.
of ensoulment? And if you were to
Mm-hmm.
get an abortion after the point of ensoulment, I feel like there would be more stigma around
Uh-huh.
versus
That makes
before
sense.
that point of ensoulment. I feel like most people are like, okay, it's like kind of accepted Islamically, right?
Uh-huh.
So there's that part of it, and then, but people don't know about the rulings for the most part
Yeah.
because they've
Yeah.
never had to like grapple with these decisions in the,
Right.
in a like a whatever, an actual way. Or sometimes decisions are made for them and they don't even realize. Like I had some conversations with elders in the community where they were like, I had an abortion and I did not realize I was having an abortion. The decision was made
Mm-hmm.
for me because there was
Wow.
language barriers or because there was
Right.
barriers when it comes to understanding their bodies or they were
Mm-hmm.
just told like take these pills and then they were like what is happening, right? So there's a little bit of that and then there's also just kind of like there is, and I've seen this. This is specific to the context of Pakistan. I don't know in like
Mm-hmm.
other communities or countries if this is a thing, but premarital sex or sex outside of marriage, if it results in a pregnancy, then they're like abortions all the way through because the
Yeah.
stigma
Abortions all
around,
around. Yeah.
right? Like weigh the stigma, right? Like is
Yeah.
the stigma around um sex outside of marriage and then
Mm-hmm.
carrying a pregnancy to term when you're not married is higher than the stigma of having an abortion.
Yeah.
So pick your poison kind of thing and
Mm-hmm.
like there's going to be structurally and then like this idea of shame comes into play
Yeah.
in that regard, right? What's going to bring what are people going to talk about more, right?
Yeah.
What are
Yeah.
people going to bring shame to our, to your life or your community or your family more. So
Mm-hmm.
there's that, but I don't think that is universal because the Muslim community is so diverse racially, religiously, with cultural experience. And I even just like within communities, it's like it just varies. So like I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that sense of what holds stigma is going to be universal.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
Even like, there's a huge Black Muslim population, and that's divided between immigrant Africans that have come here from Somalia, Sudan, Nigeria, wherever it might be, versus like Black American Muslims that, have been
Mm-hmm.
here for generations because of transatlantic slave trade, right? So
Right.
even their experiences of what holds stigma and what are people going to talk about might be very, very different.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it kind of makes me think of a lot of what you talked about, like it made me think of person-centered or patient-centered care in a clinic, and
Yeah,
like how much it's not about like some kind of universal one-size-fits-all like empowerment or
yeah,
like this is what it should be like, but it's about like listening like to what a person's like trying to figure out what is important to you
yeah,
and like what are your values, and then like helping a person navigate a supported experience within that.
100%.
um and it feels like something that, like, you're a national organization obviously, but that feels like something that's so hard to do in like in a national way.
Mm.
And so I guess I wonder, like, how do you approach that? I don't know if that question makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I would say given that our community is so diverse, it still feels very small. It still
Hmm.
feels very relational. You're 2 degrees of
Yeah.
separation away from everybody else. And so people will find your number when they really need to get
Hmm.
a hold of you.
Yeah.
People will reach out in some way or another. Like you just have that one auntie in the community, you go to this
Yeah.
person, and it doesn't matter if they're actually your auntie, they're somebody's auntie, and you trust that somebody, so therefore you trust this
Hmm.
auntie, right? So it's kind of like that kind of vibe.
That literally, I just had a memory, Sarah. I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, but I was in Detroit a couple of years ago and I was talking to an abortion doula who was telling me about an experience that they were having with like a Muslim abortion seeker in like, I don't know, Dearborn or something. And I was like, oh, my friend Sahar works for this amazing Muslim RJ org. And they were like, oh yeah, I talked to Sahar. So I was like, literally what you were talking about, but like in another city. I was like, great, never mind. Don't need to make that intro. Or I think that they
Yeah.
had even said that you had talked to the abortion
Oh
seeker, which
yeah.
is like even better, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So then our plan is working, right? That's what we
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
hear. That's
exactly.
like
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah,
we're available to you, regardless of what
yeah.
part of the
The
community.
sibling that you need.
The
I
sibling you
love,
need, the sibling you
yeah,
trust.
it's
Yeah.
really beautiful. I I guess that makes me think of like I think of Muslim community as being very centered around families, and like I guess I wonder if sort of if people having abortions, I think that sometimes in definitely like people who are coming from a Christian or like Protestant or whatever background, there is like some idea that abortion is antithetical to parenthood,
Mm,
that they feel like messed with by when they're having an abortion. And I guess I wonder how much you think like that work needs to be done, or like do people see, because I think that part of what you said out the gate was like that heart is about helping people like build families, that you are positing like abortion is like part of the way that we do
yeah,
that.
yeah.
um it's not really a question, I guess it's more of
No,
an
no.
observation,
This is
but
such a great yes, because I would say most of the Muslims we have supported through their abortions have been
mhm,
existing parents
parents,
that are
yeah,
that are making that decision in service of being an
of their
existing parent to
families, yeah.
another child, right? So,
Hmm.
and or realizing their own limitations with being able to care equitably for the families that they have, right?
Hmm.
And they do some of them have communicated a sense of guilt of like, oh,
Hmm.
like this is like, there's others in the community who have been struggling for years to conceive and like they can't, and I've been blessed with this pregnancy. What do I do? Blah blah blah. And it's kind of like just reaffirming and reassuring folks that like look, there's every person's situation is their own, right? No two
Yeah.
persons' lived experiences are going to be the same. And we do believe deeply in this idea of like struggle, or what gets mainstream definition of it is jihad, right? Like there's like
Hmm.
there's the understanding of jihad as like holy war, but there's also like your personal jihad of like the difficult decisions you might have to make in your lifetime, and like
Hmm.
do you feel like this decision is going to bring you closer to God or move you away from
Hmm.
God, and for what reasons, right? And is this a challenge or a struggle or a jihad, right, that's been given to you
Yeah.
by God? It might not make sense, and it doesn't have to make sense, right? There's not like
Right.
some like it's not like a punishment, like I mean,
Hmm.
we refer back to like the stories of the prophets, and we believe in many
Hmm.
prophets, but every single prophet was given such immense struggles, right? And it's not as like a reason like they're like they've done something wrong and that's why they're getting it. It's like how do they
Right.
move through that onto
Hmm.
the other side, still with faith in mind, right? With
Uh-huh.
still trusting God that like this happened to me, I'm being tested. How am I going to come out on the other side? And, you know, and I'm going to be shaken. You have emotional, the prophet, peace be upon him, like had a depressive episode after he lost the love of his life and, his dear family members. And that was like normalized. Like, it's like you're
Uh-huh.
supposed to feel when grief strikes you or when things happen
Yeah.
that are difficult in your life. Like, nobody
Right.
is entitled to live a life that is like nice and perfect and struggle
Yeah.
free. Like, if you are, I'm like questioning, like,
Yeah.
"Ooh, are you,
What's
what are you
going
not
on
telling us,
internally?
right? Because
Yeah.
there's stuff
Yeah.
happening you're just not telling us, right?" And so, but the prophets like went through all of that and they made it visible and they talked about it and they talked about like their processing of those struggles. And so then who are we, right? Like as like just
Yeah.
regular people, obviously we're going to feel things and it's totally valid to have those emotions and hold complexity and then still make decisions based on your individual situation.
That's so like that complexity. And it's not even that complex, it's just like human. But I
Yeah.
feel like, so much faith tells, or like so many sort of interpretations of various faith. It's like, don't do that thing.
Mm,
And like what you were just saying, that sort of like guilt is a signal of like you've gone astray. But what
mhm.
you just described as like these are things that you move through
Yeah.
with like your eyes open and your heart open and you feel them and ask yourself like how is this moving me further or closer to faith. Like
Yeah.
that's so beautiful and it's so like non-punitive and just like it's like that's the way life works, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
um there's a good question in the chat, or I guess sort of an observation, but they say, hearing the story of people not knowing they had an abortion and how abortion is expected for unmarried women, I want to make sure we're recognizing that this is coercion
A
and
hundred
not
percent.
in line with RJ principles, and how Islam plays a part in enforcing this, is the comment.
Well, yeah, because like none of those people that experience those things, if it was done without their consent, that's violence, right? That is
Yeah,
reproductive violence. And so, like for me, I'm like, I believe in God. God is going to judge the people that coerce these people into those actions, right? So
yeah,
if somebody's body is being violated, right, whether it's to have an abortion or not have an abortion, like, I can't wait. I can't wait for the day of judgment where God is going to punish those people, right? That are
yeah.
acting from a place of power and control and making
Hmm.
those decisions for those sacred beings. We have this idea of Hurma and of every individual person is a sacred being, right? And to
Hmm.
violate their bodies is a grave sin. And so I'm like, you committed a sin and you're going to be accountable,
Yeah,
right? So like
yeah,
my approach to faith and my understanding of Islam is one that honors each individual as a sacred being, and any violation of their bodies is like people will be accountable for that.
hmm, yeah. That totally makes sense. And I think that sometimes reproductive coercion, I mean, obviously, there are many, many examples articulated in work like Dorothy Roberts' work about how, like, all sorts of populations in this country have experienced reproductive coercion at the hands of the state. And a lot of times, I think that, like, the practitioners of said coercion were operating from like a less than conscious place. They were just like they were essentially just like doing the institutionalized racism of the state that like
Yeah,
was their job, as opposed to like I'm going to trick this person into having an abortion to like violate their autonomy.
yeah,
But all to say, like, there I think is long been um it's like a horrible, horrible, highly racialized form of paternalism that says that like some people can have choice, some people will do the choosing for you.
yeah,
And that is so thank you for whoever pointed that out in the chat. It's definitely like it's antithetical to everything that you're talking about, which is just this very individual centered, like you and your sacred body get to make this decision. And like let's talk about it.
yeah.
Um, I wanted to ask, so you used a phrase throughout your presentation that was, I think you were saying impacted Muslims or like most
Yeah.
impacted. And I wanted to ask like if you could just extrapolate a little bit like what that phrase means and maybe talk about just like how do you center those folks? Like how do you define that and how do you center those folks like in your programming, in your decision making, in like how do these experiences and people like sort of guide your mission and your work?
Ooh, so good. It's a great question. Okay. We're not reaching every impacted Muslim. I'll just start off the gate. Like, I wish we were, and we have a long way to go to reach the most directly impacted. When we say impacted, it's basically anybody and everybody in the Muslim community that has a sexual and reproductive life. That's pretty much
Mm-hmm.
everyone, right? That's pretty much
Yeah.
everyone. And there's some folks, because of their proximity to systems of oppression, who might have to experience more barriers to access, more barriers to information, more barriers to be able to make the decisions they want to make. And so when we're thinking about most directly impacted, it's who's at the center of those systems, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
target of making sure those systems are working against them. So it's oftentimes Black, queer, trans, potentially immigrant, potentially there might be language barriers. There might be also citizenship barriers to be able to have access to like things like health insurance. They
Mm-hmm.
might be in states that are that have restrictive policies and bans in place. I mean, the list, and then age even could play into that, right? So the list goes on and on. We're 100% not reaching everybody. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll do whatever we can to support and prioritize folks that are more directly impacted. So,
Mm-hmm.
another thing we like to think about is that it's not just, you know, cis women who have abortion.
Yeah.
And so, we're trying to also move away from the language of like women and abortions to something more gender inclusive, something more
Mm-hmm.
expansive. And so that was like an intentional thing to also like kind of make it known that like regardless of your
Yeah.
gender identity, you have a sexual and reproductive life, we're going to be here for you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, those are some things we think about. We have three mutual aid funds. One of them is called our Reproductive Justice Fund, and it supports people with accessing money to be able to cover their medical bills or get access to childcare or their basic needs met if they've just had some sort of medical procedure. So we've had folks who like recently had hysterectomies and they're like, I just need groceries
Mm-hmm.
for the week, or meal train situation, or folks that have had abortions and, they need, again, like support, like practical support, either post or pre. Folks that have just had babies and they're like, I
Mm-hmm.
need a lactation consultant. Like, can you pay for the services? Or doula, birth worker services, or physical therapy. I mean, the range is so
Amazing.
vast. And so we're just like, yeah,
It's
whatever,
like what do you need that's related to
what do you
your
need?
reproductive health and life and how can we help you meet
Yes.
that need? That's
Yeah.
so beautiful.
Yeah. So that's in a
That
pilot phase. We have about four agencies that we're working with to try to get money back into the community with them.
and is it going to be how do people find the RJ fund? Or like is it like a does it function like an abortion fund?
So right now we have four collectives and agencies that we're working with where they're
Uh-huh.
connected to community and then they
Okay,
submit
gotcha.
applications on behalf of their community
I
members.
see.
So it's like one that works with like refugee populations, Project Cadra. There's Birth Workers of Color Collective. There's Muslim Birth Workers Collective.
Awesome.
And I'm missing DuPont Clinic and Feminist Center. So that's
Cool.
kind of the collective we're currently working with.
I
We
see.
don't have enough funds to open it up
Yeah.
publicly,
No.
but we do, like Heart kind of acts as an agency as well. So if there's folks within the Heart community that need access, then
You'll
I'll just be the person that fills out the application for them.
yeah. So amazing.
But you can also
Um
donate to the RJ Fund because
yeah, I was just gonna say that was gonna be my next question is I don't know if Erin can find that in the chat. I don't do if
No,
folks want to support that work, would they just be donating to Heart, or is there a specific uh
that is
place?
such a great question, which I'm about to pull up. So we do have a way you could donate specifically to the RJ Fund. I'm gonna drop it in the chat.
Amazing.
Yeah. And it's for those that are Muslim, it's also like zakat eligible, which means you can what you call it? You can we have to pay 2.5% of our income and wealth
Hmm.
to charity. And so this
Oh, okay.
fund like can qualify for that. So if you want to give your
Okay.
zakat to us, we will take it.
It's like a spiritual 501(c)(3).
Yeah, it's a way to cleanse your wealth because we also
It's
know
hell
our
yeah,
wealth is most likely coming from
dirty.
prostitutes. Yeah.
That's amazing. Um, Lena, do you have anything to add? I get you're just
No, I like really see Heart as like the work that Heart does is like a really amazing and very comprehensive, and I feel like as like a young woman kind of like growing into myself. I'm like 22 by the way, but I feel like I'm still like discovering like parts of like my reproductive health and like sexual health, and so at least for me I can say that like Heart is doing amazing work, especially as somebody who attended, and this is like a whole other like can of worms, but like I attended an Islamic school, and a lot of the sort of like layers of like gendered Islamophobia that Sahar was
mhm.
talking about, like I faced myself and like other community members like faced that as well. And so like I think I only like recently discovered Heart like in the past couple years or so. So as somebody like who attended that school and was in that environment and like faced those sort of barriers, I know that like Heart, like the work that they do, mashallah, is like really amazing. And I hope that folks on this call can benefit as well as like share the work that Heart does with other folks as well. Because yeah, it's very comprehensive. But Sahar definitely has a lot more training than me to answer a lot of the questions that you asked. But yeah.
No, that was beautiful. Thank you for like sorry to I called on you, put you on blast, but that is really it's so cool that you are now getting to work towards like being that sibling that you needed maybe. Um it's really cool.
Yes, no, I agree because I know you have to probably go in a little bit, but I like in high school I worked with, I don't know if people know, but the organization period, and so my sister and I actually like we were seeing a lot of these barriers and we're like, what can we do about it? And so we started a chapter of the nonprofit organization period in Sacramento, where I'm from, and we sort of like talked a lot about like menstrual stigma and like the various forms
Hmm.
that takes place, like both in the Muslim community but also like outside of the Muslim community. So that was certainly like a big thing for us is just trying to like start with that baseline education because unfortunately
Yeah.
that is severely lacking in many
Uh-huh.
different forms. But yeah, so Heart is definitely like tackling that in many ways. And I think like the sex talk book I think is really a great resource for people as well. For people who are Muslim or non-Muslim or wherever you are on the faith of or the spectrum of being Muslim.
Um, I love that. And I was going to ask, I mean, I want to ask if there's just anything else that we didn't get to that you'd like to share or shout out. But I guess, Lena, you just mentioned that book. I forget the title already, but I don't know if y'all want to just like shout out some of your like resources that you love that folks can find on your website or like specific programs. And my last question is just like, how can people listening to this support your work? How can we like lift you up? How can we be better movement partners? Um, you know, all of that.
I think follow us on social media. That's a big one. We're at Heart to Grow. If you want to meet us in person, we're gonna be in LA soon. And we're having like an Eid party. It's called our Heart LA Summer Soiree or something. So come to our Eid party, and then I mean, we work a lot in coalition as well. So we're a part of a collective called Fund Abortion Not War. We're trying to bridge the gap within our movement spaces to recognize being anti-imperialist, anti-Zionist, pro-abortion, pro-bodily autonomy. All of those things are very much tied to each other. And so looking for like-minded folks within movement spaces who might want to join our coalition and the work that we do. We support like abortion funds that are pro-Palestinian that have lost funding for the politics that they hold. And so that's a part of the work. Heart itself, I feel like yeah, we're also just like constantly looking to train up folks that maybe are working
Hmm.
with Muslim populations. And so if there's ever an opportunity for us to come and do like a professional development training for your org, your clinic, your community, please let us know because we have
Oh
a lot.
yeah, I was going to ask about that because I remember you mentioning that a while ago that you do, like, I don't know if you consider it EA, like technical assistance
Yeah.
training, but like cultural competency training
Yeah.
for clinics. Can you talk a little bit about that and about how like someone might seek that out?
Yeah, so we have a training department and we do workshops. They range from like 2 hours to like a few days kind of thing
Hmm.
on a range of topics. So we have a few different frameworks that we could train folks on about at the individual level, how do you work with Muslims to respond with compassion if you get like a disclosure of sexual violence? So we have stuff on sexual violence, sexual health, and then also reproductive justice. So depending on what you need training on, we have different trainings per issue
Hmm.
area, and then different trainers would conduct those different trainings. But if you do need to get in touch with us to request a workshop, let me send you the form for that. And somebody from our training department will get back to you. Usually it's a fee for service. So yeah, we
Hmm.
have different tiers depending on what you're requesting and what topic it is that you want us to train you on.
Amazing.
Yeah,
You are doing so much beautiful work, and it is an honor and a privilege and a pleasure to be in movement with you. And Lena, it was so lovely to meet you and hear from you a little bit today. And thank you, everybody, for being here. Everybody, please be good to yourselves. And it's a lot. It's so much right now, and we're in this together. And I believe that we're gonna win.
me too. Thank you so much, Amelia, and Shout Your Abortion, and Lena. First public appearance by Lena. Yay!
Yay! And
Yes,
it was perfect.
thank you.
Take
Thank
care,
you for
y'all.
having
Stay in
us.
touch.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, I think we hop off. Bye.